Greetings world, dear activists, dear anons. Today we will discuss the Geoengineering Disclosure by The Economist. Please find more in our playlist link in the description box. These idiots are fighting a problem not caused by humans. How could this spraying be allowed? There is no anthropogenic, man-made climate change. The Earth's atmospheric CO2 concentration is about 0.0383% by volume. CO2 is therefore a trace gas. CO2 is a vital building block for Earth and its inhabitants. The CO2 concentration during exhalation by the human body is approximately 4%. After more than 20 years of active clandestine geoengineering, they are force-feeding it openly now. Chemtrails have been so successful, right? That's what's caused all the problems in the first place. Weather used as war is nothing new. It's just been ramped up for past several years, and in turn the result are killing us all. They have to continue to do damage control, all while denying those chemtrails those pesky conspiracy theorists keep bringing up. If we think the chemtrails are bad now, we haven't seen nothing yet. Mad scientists, lying elitists, turn down the sun. Screw you, Keith. How can our kids make a decision when you take out their conscious minds with aluminum, fluoride, lead and mercury you put in the water, food, vaccines and geothermal nanoparticulates which you have termed as chemtrails? Aluminium amplifies the effects of fluoride. Liars. 2018 most likely marks 20 years since David Keith began his evil experiment of introducing nanoparticles of metals into the atmosphere, 20 kilometers up in the stratosphere, twice as high as a commercial jet. This fucker has been spraying us for decades using commercial jets and military aircrafts. Now he wants to spray even higher. What the fuck? Listen to what this piece of dog shit said back in 1990 about this subject. Reflecting the sunlight back. This is one of the stupidest idea and will mess up even more, as plants will not be able to do photosynthesis to their full potential. Sounds like they are really trying to help, except there never was any problem in the first place. Blocking the sun is insane, as all plant, animal and human life will suffer and hundreds of thousands will die because of these insane policies by satanic people. The climate was perfectly fine until your owner, Rothschild's minions, began spraying nanoscale metals, nanobots, desiccated blood cells, bacterias and all kinds of other shit up there, which has been ongoing for at least 20 years. This has everything to do with transhumanism. The global self-appointed elites need to go bye-bye. We are anonymous. We will never forgive the intoxication of the planet. We will never forget your satanic behavior. We are legion. Expect us.
What if you discovered a way to cool down the planet? Extreme weather events are becoming more common and more ferocious. As the surface temperature of the Earth continues to rise, so too will the ferocity of natural disasters. In 2018, scientists will take bold steps to explore a technology that could reverse the effects of climate change.
It's an engineering project that would literally touch every living thing on the planet.
They're looking at ways to reflect sunlight back into space and cool down the Earth. Insurers say the number of weather-related disasters has quadrupled since 1970. While world leaders are debating and disputing climate change and the ways in which humans alter their behavior on Earth, some scientists discuss changes to the Earth itself. In 2018, they'll take to the stratosphere to learn what it might take, or cost, to cool the planet directly. Geoengineering is the pioneering science that could well be on everyone's lips in 2018.
The idea of geoengineering is the idea that humans purposefully influence the climate of the planet. Solar geoengineering specifically is the idea of introducing a substance into the stratosphere that will cool down the planet by reflecting back sunlight. The same idea as wearing a white shirt in summer. The white shirt reflects sunlight back. You don't feel as hot as if you wear a black shirt.
This is humans deliberately trying to have an effect on the climate, a fundamentally different undertaking from merely messing up the climate, which we've been doing for centuries.
The team from Harvard University is the first in the world to test the effects solar geoengineering might have in the stratosphere.
Our experiment will be a small balloon payload that weighs a few hundred kilograms. It'll fly about 20 kilometers up in the stratosphere. That's about twice as high as a commercial jet. It will release a small amount, less than a kilogram of materials, and then it'll fly back and forth and measure the way those interact with the background chemistry of the stratosphere.
What makes this experiment unique is that there has never been a purposeful introduction of materials in the stratosphere to study the impact this has.
The experiments in 2018 won't impact the climate, but if one day implemented, this controversial intervention could help curb extreme weather events.
Geoengineering offers options for reducing the harm that real people are going to suffer in their tens of millions and hundreds of millions.
If we turn down the sun a little bit, that brings the Earth's energy more into balance, and that could reduce some of the risks like extreme storms or extreme temperatures.
Solar geoengineering has the potential to save lives, but it also poses unknown risks.
You're introducing something into the environment that wasn't there naturally. There will be side effects. The question is, can we understand how big or small they are?
If humanity ever decides to do it, there will be deep uncertainty about how well it works and what the risks are.
And there are fears that merely researching geoengineering might be detrimental to the long-term fight against climate change.
There are a number of highly respected scientists who say that experiments on solar geoengineering should not be done. Their concern is that you will make people think there is an option available, that is a solution to climate change.
At best, solar geoengineering is a supplement to cutting emissions, not a substitute for cutting emissions.
Some environmentalists say that the drive to reduce carbon dioxide emissions could be lost if there seemed to be a quick fix. And deciding who controls a technology that affects everyone on the planet won't be easy.
You are going to have disagreements about where to do this, about how quickly to do this. And those sorts of disagreements might lead to international tensions.
Ultimately, solar geoengineering could prove a risk not worth taking. But ignoring it now could be even more dangerous.
I believe that choosing ignorance over knowledge is never the right choice.
Our generation aren't the deciders. It's our kids or their kids who will make the real decisions about implementation. My fundamental view is that we owe it to our kids to give them more information. If we do no research, we give them a gift of ignorance.
Global Alert News weekly broadcast, 6 to 7 Saturday mornings, 7 to 8 Sunday mornings.
With
1 hour commercial free.
And all sorts of fascinating information on geoengineering. And you've got a heck of a new, how long has this, what do you call it, Dane? Do you call this a pamphlet or do you call it a booklet?
It's a 20-page fact and photo summary booklet. And those are actually at Orchard Nutrition. If you're in the Reading, Shasta County area, Orchard Nutrition has those copies for free. And we'll leave a stack of copies here at the station today, Clark, for people to come in the station and grab those. And that's very condensed information to cover the climate engineering issue, which includes copies of patents, copies of government documents, copies of a federal gag order that's currently in place on all National Weather Service and all NOAA employees. Why would the government gag the weathermen?
And why indeed? Do you have an answer on any of this, Dane? Do we know what's going on?
We have a very big elephant in the sky, if you will, Clark. We have every science institution on the planet discussing geoengineering. We have every mainstream media source on the planet discussing geoengineering, every country discussing geoengineering, but none of them willing to admit it's ongoing and has been. Why? Because the liability issues are beyond comprehension. Once the population realizes the climate system is being manipulated on a global scale, don't you think they'll be extremely upset and concerned that any particular weather event may have been affected? Every weather event perhaps affected by what's going on in our skies without our knowledge or our consent.
Now, what are you worried some of the causes, what are some of the things that are happening to humans because of this geoengineering? Are there effects that are happening to us?
Well, let's look at the amount of material coming down in lab tests. We've done about 70 in Shasta-Siskiyou County alone, and there's a mountain of toxic heavy metals coming down through our breathable air column, starting with aluminum, barium, strontium, manganese. So, Clark, as you know, we've tried for many years here to get local officials to examine that issue. Wherever they believe it's come from, it's there. And these elements, in fact, match climate engineering patents exactly, starting with aluminum again. And we know that local agencies are detecting this. I've been in closed-door meetings here in Redding, shown lab tests of the Sacramento River that carried massive spikes of aluminum in them that the local agencies here did not disclose, have not disclosed, and we have a legal team in the U.S. working on that issue now. We've already filed a lawsuit in Canada, and we have filed a lawsuit in the U.S., Clark, against the U.S. Department of Commerce. Why the U.S. Department of Commerce? Because they're the overseeing agency for NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. NOAA is not giving us, or our attorneys, their Freedom of Information Act requests, which they're required to do. So what are they hiding? Why won't they give us any information?
Interesting that aluminum, isn't that one of the elements that they're saying is a major cause of autism?
Aluminum is related to a list of neurological diseases too long to go into here, but autism, yes, Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, and we now know from recent peer-reviewed study that the core causal factor of Alzheimer's is aluminum. We have peer-reviewed study now, this is very recent, that states on the record that regardless of any other environmental factor, without aluminum, there would be no Alzheimer's in the normal human lifespan of 100 years. So again, there's a lot to cover up, and certainly the population won't be receptive to know that these elements are being sprayed into the atmosphere. And the world's most recognized geoengineers, starting with David Keith from Harvard University, has stated on the record, this is on film and on the record. In fact, if people search Dane Wigington, David Keith, they'll see me confronting him at an international conference where he stated on the record their goal of putting 10 to 20 million tons of aluminum nanoparticulates into the atmosphere annually.
The little picture is from a nanofabrication study, which shows you can make very high quality, and do this in just a jet in a very simple way, make high quality aluminum particles just by spraying aluminum vapor out, which oxidizes. So it's certainly in principle possible to do that. There's a big literature that's already looked at that. And you could do that by either building new versions of these aircraft or even re-engineering existing aircraft. So there's some ideas of that. So you go to an engineering firm and you want this done. They don't say this is hard or unusual. They say, okay, yes, we could do it. Aerosol geoengineering looks like it is so cheap that the cost is basically not going to be an issue. That means that implementation decisions will be risk-to-risk decisions. The risk of doing it against the risk of not doing it. And it makes the problem of how we govern it fundamentally harder and different and novel. So I've told you that it's cheap to deliver materials to the stratosphere, and I'm convinced that's true. I don't think that will change. But I think the more we do research, the less easy this will look, the more complicated the environmental effects will look, and that's a good thing, because right now it looks too easy. So I think that if we do more research, we're likely to find out that it's harder and more complicated than we thought, and that the side effects are harder to manage, and that's a healthy outcome that will make it easier to do the management. Of course, the opposite reaction is possible. It's an empirical question how people will actually react to knowledge about this. Another reaction is to say, if these crazy scientists are so concerned about putting CO2 in the atmosphere, they want to think about these things, then that might actually mean we should be more serious about the risks of CO2 in the atmosphere. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids.
Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere? in particular small particles in aluminum.
So the collaborators of mine working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie Mellon who focused on human health impacts. And while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation in bevel, pencil, and paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you're just thinking about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at with some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
To clarify, so 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere will have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. We're to separate out the toxicological. So the alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing. Alumina, we've only begun to research and published nothing. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow. We haven't looked at it. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow. We haven't looked at it.
Dr. John Holdren has agreed to serve as Assistant to the President for Science and Technology and Director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. I look forward to his wise counsel in the years ahead.
My personal opinion is that we have to keep geoengineering on the table. We have to look at it very carefully because we might get desperate enough to want to use it.
Now, what do they claim? It's just vapor trails?
Yeah, what's the goal here? I mean, what are they trying to do?
The goal, this is important, the goal, solar radiation management, to block some of the sun's incoming thermal radiation as mitigation for global warming, with no comprehension as to the consequences of doing so. So this is another one of the instances where we have the science, so-called science community, not taking into account any of the consequences and attempting to manipulate Earth's life support systems. And the public has a right to know, period.
Can I break in here?
Absolutely. By the way, you've got you have CNN here today.
So I'm here with Beam News. We are a digital startup from CNN, but we are here to spend the day with Dane, and I just have a couple questions for you based off of some of the information that you've been giving. So you talked about some of these chemicals and the effect that they had on people's health. Would you say that geoengineering then is directly impacting people and giving them these diseases?
What I would say is this. We know the materials are there. Mm-hmm. Lab tests prove that. We have peer-reviewed science study to prove the effect of those materials on the human organism. We know the materials are not coming from China, as many people would like to claim, because we have air studies from California Air Resources Board. So the question is, if the materials are there and we know they're harmful, why aren't local agencies investigating wherever they think it's coming from? But the fact that we can find no other plausible source but climate engineering is also of grave concern. When we know that something's blocking out the sun, because that's my background in the solar industry, I'm losing 78 to 80% of my solar uptake on various days, and that's the specific purpose of solar radiation management, to block the sun. So the bottom line is the materials are there, we know they're harmful from science study, and agencies are not investigating. Why not?
And would you say that any of this is, for a lot of experts that we've spoken to at different universities, they just point to climate change. They say CO2 is emitted from these airplanes in the sky, and that is what has to do with, the degradation of wildlife, of forestry, what have you. Climate change is the reason for these effects.
Climate change is certainly a massive problem, but when we have, for example, the U.S. military stating on the record the greatest national security threat of all is the disintegrating climate, do we think they would ask our permission before engaging in these programs? That's very naive. And where's the metals coming from? Where's all this contamination coming from?
Another answer that I was given from Harvard, from the researchers that you mentioned, is that in the sediment of the earth, aluminum exists in the earth's soil, just naturally. It's in the earth's crust.
But not in the rain. And aluminum does not exist in the environment in free form naturally. Does not exist in the environment in free form, period. It has to be mined and refined and distributed before it can, and that's what we're finding. So they're not answering those questions honestly. And now they don't even talk about aluminum anymore. The geoengineers don't, for obvious reasons. So the bottom line is the metal's there, it's in free form, it's in our precipitation, should not be. It's killing everything from terrestrial to aquatic insects. Why is no agency investigating this issue? Why not?
We've run out of time on air, you guys, but fascinating as always, Dane. And we'll be looking for the CNN YouTube series.
Yeah.
Very cool. We'll get some more info on that. Be sure you check out Dane. When is it on Saturday, Dane?
6 to 7 a.m. and 7 to 8 on Sundays. And for those who want to investigate this issue, again, very comprehensive booklet at Orchard Nutrition or Reading Radio. Pick up a free copy and find out what you haven't been told.
Pretty slick. Geoengineering, a chronicle of indictment. We will have them here.
A lot of information in there, yeah.
Thank you, Dane, for coming in. Dane,
thank you, guys.
It is 8:30. Let's check in with Fox News on News Talk 105.7.